Very good morning, and welcome to this conference on urban transformations in cities of Delhi. We are indeed privileged, first of all, to welcome Mr. Manish Sisodia, who needs no introduction to this audience. All I'll say about him is that he has one remarkable achievement to his credit amongst many others, which is he is the architect of an extraordinary social and political movement. And I think that's the best compliment you can actually give somebody in this age. We are honored and delighted to have you. But I think it is also a remarkable coincidence, I think, having him grace this conference this morning. Because what we are going to see in the next few minutes, we are going to begin with a presentation by Dr. Pratap on the Cities of Delhi project and some of its main findings. And then I'll invite Mr. Sisodia to give his keynote address. But what we will see this morning, in a sense, is an interesting conjuncture of two things that normally don't happen together, which is there is an area of intellectual inquiry that is throwing up very big questions about the nature of political participation in Delhi, about the quality of service delivery in Delhi, about the institutional identity of Delhi, about the political architecture that should govern a city like Delhi. And you have, in a sense, a political party that perhaps in an unprecedented way in Indian history actually arose out of raising many of these questions. And I think this opening session is perhaps a kind of contribution to taking that dialogue forward. I mean, there's a wonderful symmetry, in a sense, coming at these questions from two different directions, from the direction of a social and political movement and from the direction of academic research. So I think the conversation should be interesting and productive. So what I'll do is I'll ask my colleague Partha Mukhopadhyay to briefly introduce the Cities of Delhi project. What is it? What are some of its main findings? And then I'll invite Mr. Sisodia to give his keynote address. I gather there is a major traffic jam on sort of this side of Delhi, so some VIP movement. So hopefully more of our colleagues will join us as the morning proceeds. Partha?
Thank you, Pratap, and thank you, Mr. Sisodia, for accepting to be here. I'll spend only about 15 minutes quickly to run through this introduction to what exactly the Cities of Delhi project did. The Cities of Delhi project is essentially put together by the team at CPR, which is there up on the screen, and all the outputs are on that particular website, a website which is a bilingual website. Which has content both in English and in Hindi. This is the Hindi version of the website. So far, it's organized across three kinds of issues: places, processes, and institutions. In places, we have about 10 settlements across JJCs, resettlement colonies, unauthorized colonies, and regularized unauthorized colonies. And then we have processes when we looked at resettlement, eviction, regularization, and in situ redevelopment. And institutions, we've looked at DJB, DUSIB, and DDA. The documents so far, I'll just run them through. The ones which are in Hindi, all documents will eventually be translated to Hindi. The ones which are in Hindi are the ones which are up there right now, but there are some obviously which have not yet been put together. But we have to have a lot of that done over the next couple of days itself. In addition to documents about places and processes, we have 4 short policy briefs dealing with the nature of governance in Delhi for people who are not familiar with it, regularization of the unauthorized colonies, rehabilitation of JJCs, and the categorization of settlements in Delhi, and an overview report which is there with you in the structures. So the key findings that we have as far as places are concerned is in unauthorized colonies, we see a large withdrawal of public service delivery and a provision of private providers stepping in to provide those services, which obviously is just not more than inclusion, it also provides an opportunity for profit. And the status in most of these places, at least as far as residents are concerned, seems to be in limbo, with a lack of clarity about exactly what kind of structures are going to come through. In Jhuggi Jhopri clusters, there is actually a quite large variation in types of services that sort of comes through. You have very well-maintained facilities versus completely non-functional ones. And depending on where you are, you could have people living in relative fear or of eviction and demolition, and other places where we have found people who are much more secure in that settlement. Of course, post the new government coming in, there would be some, these are all based on research that happened between in 2013 and 2014. So we had a bit of the initial stuff coming through. In resettlement colonies, the nature of entitlement of services is not quite clear. What exactly, when you have a full-fledged planned resettlement structure, what exactly is the kind of services that can expect is not particularly clear. Neither is the nature of tenure very clear. Right. What are the key findings regarding institutions? The first about DDA. This thing that comes there is the influence of the DDA, which comes from a 1978 report prepared by the Tata Consultancy Services for the DDA. And I think roughly the same status exists today. But broadly speaking, DDA today, especially since it started selling land instead of doing things at cost, you have a situation where it is roughly about 25,000 crores in cash reserves, in addition to its land bank. It's almost more than that right now. So this is what we can find from the accounts, and this is part of the story of the account. And non-transparent reporting. It's focused on infrastructure and high-end colonies, coordination with both internally across divisions and with other service providers like the DJB. For example, when we created colonies in places like Savda Khevra and even Dwarka, the kind of services that were sort of trunk infrastructure supposed to be provided wasn't particularly coordinated. And in 1978, they said that there was a data explosion at the lower levels and information starvation at higher levels, describing the nature of the DDA internally itself. DJB, in some senses, comes out looking relatively better. There is no legal bar in the structure that comes through. It's not required to do so, but can do so if it chooses to. There's a visible effort to improve water tanker services, but in terms of sanitation, we don't see that kind of visibility at this point in time. DUSIB was created, the Slum and JD department kept moving between the Municipal Corporation of Delhi and the DDA. It was part of the DDA once, and it moved into the MCD once. And finally, in 2010, you created this agency called DUSIB, which was under the government of the National Territory of Delhi, which is supposed to coordinate all efforts. However, what we found on the ground was oftentimes other departments of the government of Delhi, like the PWD, would take action without informing DUSIB. So there is both, it's not only problems for coordinating across levels of government, it's also problems of coordinating within the government itself. And then you have, and therefore as a result, you have relatively limited capacity effect improvements on the ground. And obviously, it only controls land in about a third of the JJCs, which is basically the land which is coming through that area. And the capacity for social engagement, largely staffed by engineers, and therefore the capacity for social engagement which is necessary in a lot of these choices is missing. Now let's quickly turn to what could be done in some areas. And one of the very interesting reports that come about, I think, over the last few months is in the monitoring of DJB tankers. And as you can see, there's now a website where you can do check what given the delivery point, where the location is, how much quantity, how much arrival time. The question is if all of this, whether it's actually happening on the ground or not, would only be relevant if people who are actually getting water through the tanker have an ability to engage with the system and then respond and saying, yes, the tanker is here and came and delivered water at this point in time. As long as it remains a purely internet-based computer system, it becomes harder to do that. So one of the possibilities is to turn it both into bilingually as well as an app that you can access on your phone. And the other issue is, we have seen this in a couple of our own JJCs that we have researched, is having on-site tanking facilities, so large Syntex kinds of tanks which are essentially filled through tankers that are coming through, which then removes this iconic image of Delhi, which is people swarming over a DJB tanker with pipes coming all over it and running all of the things across. So, so these are the four big processes that sort of seem to be happening. We have a number of state actions. Patrick and I put together a paper in this month's seminar that increase inequality and differentiate citizenship. Many state actions, such as the relocation of people to resettlement colonies and then not providing them with services, essentially ends up in inequality because it affects their ability to earn livelihoods. The control over land and the privileging of exchange value over use value. So, for example, if you need land for public services like a bus depot, the question is, do you end up getting it and what kind of prices you put on it? The non-recurrent functionality of informality and the lack of mechanisms for participation, which is especially severe for Delhi. But these are big processes, so what can we do to chip away at these kinds of big processes? And these are like quick, immediate actions that we have put together. One, first is increasing transparency of the DDA. And yes, the DDA is an agency that doesn't come under the government of Delhi, but since the government of Delhi is associated with it, it's part of its governing structure, the idea is to push them to be more transparent. And that's hard for agencies to actually put back denied. The land banks of both the government of Delhi as well as DUSIB has a complete map of where exactly all the JJCs are. There's no reason why DDA can't have a similar map of where its lands are. Right? We have, the second is an empowerment of DUSIB. We need to be clear about that DUSIB is the agency that will be doing it. A policy document that details what the process of eviction and rehabilitation is, a notice, and then a mandatory process for participation and consultation, operating manual if you want to do this. And it has to be the sole agency which will actually do this. And therefore, all other government agencies need to work through, even if they're on their own land, need to work through DUSIB to do it. And they need to staff DUSIB with additional skills. There's also, on the regularization of unauthorized colonies, I think we need, for example, what exactly is the process? Is when, like a passport tracking process, you've applied for a passport, where exactly is it at this point in time? So that kind of structures that have much more information out there. In works that have gone on, under the JNNURM, there used to be quarterly progress reports of each project, how much money has been spent and how much thing has been achieved. Such a system could be put forward for works that are happening in the unauthorized colonies. And of course, clarity on when they can actually register their properties going forward. So we need to assign responsibility for service provisions in JJCs. Something like we have a proposed DUDA that was there in the budget speech, which essentially coordinates across different structures. And then piloting an upgradation project. The standard structure that has been there previously, and I think that was there in the manifesto, but now in the new Housing for All seems to be relatively weak, is we focus now on in situ redevelopment, which means you clean out that place and rebuild houses on that structures, to the extent that can you upgrade these kinds of houses. And there are agencies that are available to work with, and that's one possible area, but that seems to be a possible area. And for each resettlement colony, especially the 45 resettlement colonies, not only do we need structures of providing them with tenure and so on, but also to recognize that they are the planning responsibility of the state. The state actually resettled them. There's no reason why the state can't deliver services in an area which has been developed by the state. It's like a DDA colony, but it doesn't look like a DDA colony. Right? So, and appointing what are called area managers, which is a issue that's been used in the UK and in South Africa and so on and so forth, so coordinate actions in that space. And finally, have DJB define a septage management plan, because there's a very large number, in the absence of the kinds of investments in sewerage, a lot of people have moved into things like septic tanks, and we need some kind of process to start managing that and perhaps linking them to the unused sewage treatment capacity that we currently have. So these are quick, immediate actions that could possibly be taken, and we can take it forward. The floor is yours.